You can't succeed in a task if you don't really understand what the task is about. Maybe you've been given a presentation for an exam or an assessment or for a new promotion and you don't really know how to go about it. So my name's Erica. I've worked as a corporate trainer, a corporate coach, and as a university senior lecturer and as an author. So I would like to help you understand what the task of presenting is all about so that you can begin the preparation of your next presentation. So first of all, let's talk about what is presentation and have a look at a definition of presentation. The first thing about presentations is that there are different scenarios. You might be giving a presentation in a small room in front of 6 or 7 people. It might be in a large auditorium with an audience of 400, 500, 600 people. You might be presenting online and you've got a worldwide audience of 5,000, 10,000 people. However, there are some things about presentation that don't change. And I would like to give you a definition of presentation that I've come up with. So let's go through this. A presentation is a unique oral means of communication in which the speaker gives listeners a message within a given time frame using visuals and other aids to support and strengthen the message. So what I would like to do with this definition is go through certain key words in it and help you understand what presentation is all about. So first of all, let's deal with the word communication and have a look at communication. Well, if you look around for a definition of communication, you'll probably find something that includes the words sender and receiver. And this is really the process of communication. In any communication, there's some kind of sender. So you might be putting together a message in an email. It might be giving an opinion in a meeting. It might be having a conversation with friends in a cafe, or indeed a presentation. And then there are our receivers who get these different kinds of messages. In the process of communication, the sender puts together a message. This process is often called encoding. So the sender puts together the message, then gives the message to the receiver or the receivers. And then the receivers go through a process called decoding, and this is basically interpreting the message. Now, when receivers have received the message, then they usually give some kind of feedback to the sender. It could be sending back an email, it could be replying to the opinion that's been given in the meeting. It's a kind of cycle. The sender gives messages, the receiver gets the messages, interprets it, puts together another message, gives feedback, the sender puts together their reply, and so on and so on and so on. Now, in my definition, I also use the word unique. So presentation fits into this definition of communication, but in some ways it's a little bit different. So how does it fit into the communication? Well, with a presentation, there is definitely a sender or senders, and there are definitely receivers. And the sender is the presenter or presenters, and the receiver is the audience, the listening audience. But there are 3 things here that probably change. And the first thing is to do with numbers. When you're presenting, you're probably presenting on your own, maybe with a team of 1, 2, or even 3 other people. But you will have many more listeners. As we said before, it could be 10, 500, 5,000 people. So the numbers and the balance between senders and receivers changes with presentation. And what also changes with this is the amount of sending and receiving time. So the sender, the presenter, spends a long time putting together, hopefully spends a long time putting together their message and designing that message, and then gives that to the receiver. So in this process, the presenter will do most of the speaking or even all of the speaking, and is indeed expected to do that. And in return, the listeners will do all of the listening or most of the listening. So the relationship between the speakers and the listeners is slightly different to other means of communication. The third thing that changes here then is the question of feedback. We said that communication can be a cycle. Now, listeners do give feedback. Sometimes in presentations they have the opportunity for verbal feedback. It can be quite limited. There are given times usually for questions in the presentation, and very often the listeners are giving non-verbal feedback to the presenter. So the other thing that we know from this definition is that if you want to be a good presenter, or even a great presenter, then you need to know and you need to learn an awful lot about speaking skills and putting together a longer message so that it works and you can keep the attention of your listeners. But you also need to know something about the listeners, how they listen and take in the message that you're giving. So let's go back to speaking. Presentations are all about speaking, speaking, speaking. If you're preparing a presentation, then I feel it's a really bad idea to start writing out a script, or even to write out a script and learn it by heart. In my experience, this often leads to the presenter giving their presentation in a quite robotic, unnatural style. What you want to aim for with your presentation and in your practice is to speak in a conversational style. And I think it really helps presenters to think about this. If you're in a cafe with friends, you're just speaking in a conversational style. And a presentation in some ways is no different to that. It's just the numbers that are different. It might be a conversation with 6 people, as we said, 500 people, 5,000 people. But basically you will be more successful if you stick to this conversational style. And this means when you practice your presentation after putting together your material, you want to speak, speak, speak. And you can go through different procedures when you practice this speaking. You can get up in a room and simply just speak and go through your presentation. The first time you practice, you'll feel that your presentation is maybe too long, that the material doesn't flow very well, but the practice of speaking will help you to refine and develop the presentation the more that you speak it and the more that you practice the presentation. You can practice in front of a mirror. Another great thing that you can do is also just take out your mobile phone, film yourself and practice in front of your mobile phone and give yourself feedback by watching back your presentation. You can also practice with friends or family and go through the presentation. Again, the more that you practice this, the more comfortable you begin to feel. The other thing is that friends and family can give you all different kinds of feedback. They can let you know if they really understand the presentation, if they understand the flow of the presentation, and if there's anything that needs again to be refined or developed in the presentation. And then you can go back and work on these things. So the next thing that I would like to come to is the question of message. Message is really important. If you don't know what the message of your presentation is, it's going to be really difficult to put together your presentation. Every time that you do a presentation, there will be a reason that you're giving the presentation. It could be that you simply want to give more information, you want to change thinking, you want to persuade, you want to convince, you want to motivate, you want to give a call to action, you want people to come up with an action plan. There are many, many different reasons why you need the listeners to take in your message. But establishing what that message is pretty near the beginning of your preparation will really help you to design and develop your presentation. The message will definitely be part of your conclusion at the end of the presentation, and all your research and all the material that you've got can be designed so that it helps to lead to the message that you want to give. And this can be, again, checked when you're asking for feedback, when you're practicing your presentation. Ask your listeners, your friends, does the presentation have logical flow? Is there too much information that doesn't belong in the presentation? Do the arguments make sense? Do you really understand how I get to the take-home message, and do you understand what the take-home message is? So the next word in my definition that I'd like to look at is the issue of time frame. Now, when you're given a presentation, particularly if it's in an exam or an assessment, you will be given some kind of time to give the presentation in. In the university I worked in, we gave exam presentations of 10 minutes, 15 minutes and 20 minutes. Now let's take the 20-minute example. If you're given 20 minutes to give an exam presentation, then it's a good idea to stick to the 20 minutes. Being asked to give a presentation as part of an exam is a test of your ability to organise materials, and part of that organisation is being able to stick to the 20 minutes. If you present for 15 minutes and you're under time, you will lose grades. If you present for 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and you still haven't got to the final part of your presentation, it's probably an indication to your examiners that you haven't practiced, that you haven't properly prepared, that you haven't properly managed your presentation, and in some ways maybe you don't even care fully about the presentation. Now, the issue of material is also really important when we talk about time frame. If you're given 20 minutes, then there's a limit to the amount of things that you can say and do in that 20 minutes. If I try and put in too much information in that 20 minutes and I try and get through that information, I'm not going to be very successful. One of the skills of presentation is taking the time that you've been given and designing something that fits within the time frame and works within the time frame. And when you're doing your research and you're getting your material together, this is usually a question of breaking things down. Now let me give an example of this. A topic that we often had in the university was the issue of globalization. And students were free to interpret the subject of globalization in any way that they chose. Now, if I just took the straight subject of globalization and I did research on that, and I looked at the whole history of globalization and the effects of globalization and the future of this planet, I'd probably have enough material to present, not for 20 minutes, but maybe for 4, 5, 6 hours, or maybe even for several days. Now, if I break down the topic, then I'm going to find something within that topic that is much more manageable within the 20 minutes. So I could take globalization, and in my research I begin to get very interested in the subject of pollution, which again in itself is a really big topic. Maybe then I look at different kinds of pollution, and then I get really interested in the subject of pollution in the ocean. Now, pollution in the ocean in itself can be quite a big topic. I might, again, with my research, I might find one island in the Pacific that's really dealing with the problem of ocean pollution, and you find what they're doing really interesting, and you find a subject that can fit into the 20 minutes. So finding subjects and finding directions and angles to your presentation can be really fundamental to being successful in the presentation. Think about the people who are listening to your presentation. If you're doing an exam, well, how many other people are the examiners testing on the day that you do your presentation? If they've listened to 8 other presentations, is the material that the people are presenting, is it more or less the same? When you do your presentation, are the examiners a little bit bored with what they're listening to and what they're hearing? Maybe you can find something that's unique, something that's really engaging, something that's really interesting, something that grasps the attention of your examiners and really gets them interested in what you've got to say. Again, you'll probably find that you'll be much more successful taking this approach. So looking at my definition, we've looked at unique, speaking, communication, message, and time frame. The last thing that I would look at here is the idea of opportunity. Now, when you're given a presentation, particularly if you've had no training for presentations or nobody's actually helped you to give a presentation in the past, you can feel a little bit lost, you can feel a little bit paralyzed, maybe you even feel a little bit panicked, and you begin to feel negatively about the presentation that you have to give. Now, mindset is really important. If you think negatively, you will perform negatively. If you can begin to realize that presentations are actually great, they're a really good opportunity for you. If you're younger and you're in school and you're in university and you're getting the opportunity to learn to practice presentations, this is a really great opportunity. Presentations will always be good for you in your career. Good presenters, or even great presenters, they get noticed and they get talked about in companies and organizations. So begin to see presentations from this point of view. If you find it very difficult at the beginning, you will get better and better and better with practice. Take the opportunity and enjoy the challenge. If you think positively, then you're going to perform in a much more positive way. So what we've done here is I've given you some understanding of what presentation is all about. We've talked about communication and how presentation fits into that. We've looked at speaking, the importance of message and working within your time frame and designing your materials for that time frame. And finally, we've looked at enjoying the challenge, grasp the opportunity to give presentations. So thanks for listening to this video. If you would like more help on the first steps in preparing an exam or an assessment presentation, I have designed a worksheet. I've put the link in the description below, and you can find the worksheet on the Etsy link